Hi, little Slug.
Hi, Mathis.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 314 of the Snack Covenant. In today's episode, you'll hear a special edited version of an episode from a series that's usually only on Patreon called What, Where, Why? Enemies of Elden Ring. However, this episode didn't quite go according to plan, because there was actually some useful information in it. The Snack Covenant have therefore decided to share it with you in the form of a special edited version that's slightly more listenable, while the original, much worse version is available on patreon.com/SinclairLore.
I cannot tell a lie. These people have no idea how to run a business.
You can say that again, little Slug. We hope you enjoy today's episode, What, Where, Why? Enemies of Elden Ring, Episode 5. Marika's bedroom.
That's not an enemy.
What is the location's name in English?
Marika's Bedchamber.
What is the official name in Japanese?
I checked the art book and it doesn't say.
When was this location built?
Around about the same time as the rest of Lanedale, I'm assuming.
Who built it?
That's actually a really good question. Because, Lanedale just sort of seems to have, popped out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it was built, it has different layers to it, and the Round Table Hold is obviously a much older structure. It doesn't match the rest of Lanedale. It has, this lower section that's all buried in ash that we'll talk about another time. It's got a sewer system with, that actually goes all the way down to where the Erdtree base is. It's a massive undertaking to have built this thing. It's an enormous city, but, we're just given a very weird concept of, how time works. So, I don't know, it's been built around the Erdtree. So, Marika must have, led to its construction, but it's... Just thinking about how much it would have taken to actually construct this thing is, kind of mind-blowing.
Which materials were used?
It's mostly rock.
The rock?
The rock is not a material, he's a man.
Yeah.
Unless you're implying the rock built Lanedale.
He probably could. He's very strong and big.
Well, the hierarchy of power has changed.
Where is it located?
It's located in Lanedale, in between the Erdtree Sanctuary and the Elden Throne. It being positioned there is almost like everyone who wanted to go to the Erdtree or the Elden Throne, they would have to pass by Marika.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of makes sense if you imagine she's surveying everyone who goes past.
Right.
It's actually similar to Dark Souls 2, when in order to sort of get to the depths of Drangleic, you have to walk by Nishandra's throne.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of so you everyone that goes through has to see Nishandra. Yeah.
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 Thank you, Sophie. Now, the why this time is a little bit different, because we already talked about the why in our previous episode. So this why will focus not on the chamber, but on the objects we find inside, specifically the tablets and the scrolls.
Okay, so one of the things that Marika says in her little, the echoes of Marika that Melina can sort of summon up,
Mm-hmm.
she says that her intent is to search the depths of the Golden Order and reach some kind of new understanding.
Yes.
So an important thing about, being a Golden Order fundamentalist in Elden Ring is that, we kind of take the word fundamentalist to mean that you're, fanatical. You're very, stuck in your ways, you won't change, you won't listen to reason. Within Elden Ring, a Golden Order fundamentalist is a scholar. It's someone who is dedicated to sort of understanding the Golden Order. It's not someone who has a sort of, obsessive belief in it. It's someone who is taking it apart, trying to understand how it works. Marika even says this. She says, the days of blind faith are behind us. We're now going to understand things. That's why the Golden Order Principia incantations, they require intelligence as well as faith. And the incantation that Goldmask discovers is pure intelligence, because it's okay, this is more about, rationally attempting to understand the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, Marika is doing that. when she starts talking about, I'm going to search the depths of the Golden Order. She's actually basically saying, I'm going to study the Golden Order. I'm not going to start making big proclamations. I'm not going to just believe in the Golden Order. I'm going to take it apart and make sense of it. There are two objects that we see all over Marika's room. The first is the tablets, the second is the scrolls. The tablets, to me, are the most interesting part. They're the part that stand out the most. And they stand out the most because they don't look like they belong in Lanedale. Everything in Lanedale is very ornate. It's very sort of finely carved.
It's very, like, delicate.
Yes, yeah. And they all write on, it's all books and scrolls and things like that. They don't write on clay tablets. So these clay tablets probably don't come from Lanedale. So there's two places in the game where that sort of stone aesthetic is very, very prominent. First one is Faramazula. I don't think they came from Faramazula because we don't find any like tablets like that in Faramazula. We find the closest thing you get to that in Faramazula is like there are sort of big hunks of stone in that place that have been carved, but I think they're supposed to be gravestones. Mm-hmm. And they're way, way bigger than these tablets. And also, the design on them, it doesn't look like it's supposed to be a language. It just looks decorative. It's like a filigree sort of design. It's very, very sort of flowing and fine. And, like, again, Faramazula, it's a big, like, mausoleum/cathedral place. You would expect if they used like stone tablets, you would find evidence of that somewhere there. Like there's literally statues of the beasts worshipping the dragons in like clerical garb, but there's no evidence of any stone like this. There's always the possibility that we don't see it because it all got taken and given to Marika, which is possible, but I'm going to suggest it's actually the second place that has this aesthetic, which is the bits of the Eternal Cities that seem to be even older. I guess we could call them the even more Eternal Cities.
The Eternaler cities.
The Eternaler cities. It's the thing about the Eternal Cities is like we think of them as one place. We think of like, okay, there's like Noxtella and Nokron and like the Lake of Rot.
And Nocton, Ohio.
Nocton, Ohio, yeah.
Late at night, I think of you, your vision floods my mind.
So within the Eternal City areas, there's actually two completely different architectural styles. And one of them is the kind that we think of when we think of the Eternal Cities. It's that very, very like silvery blue place. Very, very ornate, very finely wrought. The chair crypts, the sort of the big like cathedrals and things, the mimic tiers and all that stuff. But then there's another layer below that, which is the stuff that you see when you first get out of the river wells. The Shifra and Ainsel river wells. They lead to like it's like an earlier style of architecture that's a lot rougher and it's a lot more just sort of like just bricks. And that is where you find those big statues. It's just like a big dude with a beard. And he has two clay tablets with him. He's holding one and one is at his feet. And the reason I'm saying clay tablet is because like the one at his feet is literally a replica of a Babylonian clay tablet that is a map of the world.
And another thing you mentioned when we were talking, just like regular people.
That never happens.
The guy with the tablet is reminiscent of Moses.
Yeah, he's like, that's how I would describe him. He looks like the image people have of Moses. Like the big sort of man with like this massive beard in the robe, and he's got the two tablets, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, throughout the Eternal Cities, if you go looking at like what's there, the sort of the lower parts we're talking about, there are like other sort of stone tablet things. Not the same design, but you can see like they are very into just like slabs of a rock with designs on them. And a lot of the designs, again, like they are reminiscent of sort of Mesopotamian designs. There's like bull imagery and sun imagery that, like when I see it, that's what I think of. And I think that's probably kind of what they had in mind. Like a lot of it feels like, particularly in the Lake of Rot, when you go into the cloister there, like it feels like you're inside of like a ziggurat. It doesn't feel like you're inside of like a cathedral. The knowledge of how the Golden Order / Greater Will / Elden Ring, how that works probably comes from those places, because that seems to be like the point of contact. We know that they did have the Greater Will in the Eternal Cities. We assume they had like a demigod / vassal equivalent, which was the people in the chairs, because they are wearing gold. No one else in the Eternal Cities wears gold, but then you have these big skeletons in the gold robes, and gold is the color of the Greater Will. What we don't know, and we're probably sure they didn't have, is they didn't have the Elden Ring itself. And the exact way that functions is not entirely clear, because we're not sure, like, the Greater Will's there, it's having some protective role in the way the Eternal Cities functioned, because when it went away, they fell. But we don't see any evidence of the Elden Ring itself. We don't see any, like, Elden Ring designs. It's not true to say that we don't see evidence of, like, the Erd Tree or the golden foliage, because there's a little bit of it, but the point is there is a little bit of it. Like, it clearly doesn't belong there. You see, like, silver and grey and blue trees everywhere, and then there'll be, like, a single golden one, and it looks like a weed. It's like, they're sort of untouched by that. So, it's sort of clear, but not explicitly stated, that Marika comes from there. So I'm guessing that, like, her understanding of, like, the Greater Will and the Golden Order and everything, the idea of her getting all this knowledge, I think that what she's looking at now is, like, the ancient knowledge of how the Golden Order / Greater Will / Elden Ring functions. And she's had it brought to her, and she's attempting to understand that.
So let me ask you. She has these tablets, and she's trying to understand them. Who wrote these tablets? Where did the tablets come from?
That's the interesting point, because, like, we know that there is some dude who does not have a name, and we're not clear what his actual role was. But there's some very important guy in the history of the Eternal Cities who had these big clay tablets. And again, he does look like Moses, because, like, the whole Moses thing is Moses goes up to the mountain and he gets the commandments on the tablets. I am thinking he might actually be, like, the initial point of contact. Like, he might be like, I have come with the word of the Greater Will, even though I'm not technically Elden Lord, and he's brought that to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's who I think that might be, and it follows a bit from there that, like, okay, so all of these tablets, they're probably, like, attempts to understand the Greater Will from that period of time.
But then it's like, you know how there's, like, the 10 or 12 commandments? How many commandments are there?
There's 10. There's 10.
10, okay. So, take 2.
I should have lied and said, oh, there's 7. We had to cut 3, but we passed the savings on to you.
Look, when Reborn takes up so much of your headspace, something has to go.
It's when Elon Musk takes over Judaism, and he's like, a lot of these commandments are just inefficient.
Oh my god.
We'll be removing them to improve performance.
You know how there's, like, the 10 commandments?
Yes.
Judging by Marika's bedchamber, there's about 400.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, so there are 2 things I want to talk about here, right? The first one is that another thing about the Greater Will that's interesting is that I don't think it has a written language that we understand.
Okay.
It has this weird thing that's just referred to as the cipher. You only see it there's, like, the cipher weapon you can get that's basically a lightsaber made out of words. And then sometimes the Two Fingers or Morgott will seal off an area, and you'll get, like, the cipher design to, like, stop you getting in. But the Greater Will seems to communicate through geometric shapes, like the Elden Ring. It seems to communicate through vibration, and it seems to communicate through motion. So it doesn't seem to speak. It's like you watch things and you feel things, and you sort of like the way Goldmask works, where he's sort of just like, it's like, you know what dowsing is? Like water divining. It's a thing like, you might be familiar with the imagery even if you don't know, like, what it's called. It's, if you've ever seen someone with, like, a forked twig, walking around holding a
Yes,
twig out
yeah.
and then thinking they can find water with it. It's like that. Like, the idea is if you hold the twig out and you're, like, tuned into it, if you hit something, like, the twig will start to move. It's like a magnet. You'll be drawn to it. People also do it with pendulums.
I think Reborn did that in an episode.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
think it's
It all
the
comes
mountain
back. All
episode.
comes back to Reborn. Yeah. So yeah, it's almost like that. Like, he's almost like dowsing for like knowledge. He's like just holding his hand and like letting it be drawn toward things. And like, you have Corin who is watching, and Corin is just watching the way that Goldmask's fingers move and like divining from that. And like, the finger readers are the same. Like, they literally watch the two fingers and they just wiggle, and then they interpret the wiggling.
So it's like a Morse code, but with like very small motions or something.
Yeah, something like that. And like, I feel like that really fits the idea of clay tablets, because if you've ever seen like the Babylonian clay tablets, that a lot of that stuff is preserved on. And it's been preserved because they literally wrote on clay, and over time the clay just hardened. Yeah. There were libraries of Babylonian tablets that were set fire to in an attempt to destroy them, and it actually just baked the clay and made them harder.
You made them stronger.
yeah, it completely backfired. But like, if you look at those, it's because it's carved directly into the clay, like with a stylus. If you imagine someone carving one, it's actually basically someone writing on like a tablet with a stylus, like they're just holding it and writing on it. Yeah. You can feel that. Like, it's very, very like tactile. I don't know if you could actually read it like Braille, but like, you can imagine running your hand over it and sort of understanding what's written on it in a way that you can't with like ink on parchment.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to the scrolls, because the scrolls are ink on parchment. What it seems to me is like, the scrolls are, representative of it. Not representative of, they literally are. Like, this is how they store knowledge in Leyndell, because it's a very it's like a finely wrought place.
Yeah.
And like, if you look at the Golden Order Principia, like it's a bound book. So they're writing on like paper. And what I think's going on here is like, Marika is maybe attempting to work out something that is between the way that the Golden Order is understood now, which is the scrolls, and the way in which like knowledge of the greater will, this sort of like all-consuming like alien entity, the way that is understood through all these tablets. She's trying to like find something in all of this knowledge that makes sense to her.
So basically, you're saying there are the tablets, which are the knowledge concerning, the Golden Order, the Greater Will, and then there are the scrolls, and she's trying to reconcile the information.
Yeah. It's kind of like Willem in all the Bergenworth Scholars, where like they have all this old knowledge they don't quite understand, and they're trying to like make it fit into their own framework. Which again brings us back to like the idea that to be a Golden Order fundamentalist is not to be a religious fanatic, it's to be like a scholar who seeks to understand the Golden Order, which is itself a very interesting concept, because Marika is the creator of the Golden Order. But, like, by creator of the Golden Order, it doesn't mean she literally laid down everything. Like, she basically formed this thing, and she herself doesn't quite understand how it works. And that's ultimately kind of her undoing. Because in trying to make sense of it all, like, she ends up, wrecking the Elden Ring and fusing with Radigan and blaspheming against the Greater Will and everything.
That's interesting, because when we were talking about this before, off camera, the vision that I had was that the clay tablets contain the information, and what Marika is doing, or whoever is doing, they're transcribing the information into scrolls, but in a language that is current, as opposed to the Golden Order language,
Well, that's possible, but then it's like, it's all in Marika's room.
Yeah. No, but I like yours better.
Thank you. The other interesting thing, I guess, is like Goldmask in the intro. Because you see Goldmask, he's lying on top of a big stone relief. And he has like it looks like a mortar and pestle with some gold dust in it. And he seems to be filling in the stone relief with golden dust. Which isn't something we see him do in game at all. But it's like, again, it's getting back to that idea of like the Golden Order communicating through like vibrations and symbols and things rather than written language. Like, Goldmask doesn't speak. Like, that's really important. Like, we'll obviously have to do a separate thing on Goldmask, but like, Goldmask never speaks. But he's able to communicate with the Golden Order, he's able to communicate with Corrin, but he never says a word, it's all through vibration and movement. And then like the way that, you know, like the perfumers are a sort of like, they have this almost like priest-like role. Yeah, and it's like, well, you're kind of communicating through like smell. So there's all these ideas of like, that's why the greater will seems so alien. So yeah, I think like this is basically all of Marika's dissertation notes. Like those are all like the books she's taken out from the library. And then she's got these like, yeah, she's trying to make sense of it all. And I think the ultimate understanding is that she didn't really make sense of it all.
Now, let me throw a wrench in your theory.
Okay.
This bedroom is clearly reminiscent of the bedrooms we find in Dark Souls, like Guinevere's chamber and Filinor's chamber.
But okay, here's a weird thing, right? You see the guy with the Golden Order Principia, right? He is suspended in a chair, right? Marika could have, like, suspended herself. Like, that's not out of the question. Because all the imagery of Marika is her suspended. Like, I know that she's suspended now because she messed with the Elden Ring. And she's being punished by the Elden Beast. But, like, it's also possible she was suspended. Like, she's trying to be a tree. Like, she could have been suspended in the golden light, like this.
Oh, but where I was going with that is that it's not even her room and she didn't do any of her own work. That Guinevere and Filinor did her dissertation.
Would you trust Guinevere and Filinor to do your homework, though? Like, if you're doing an important, like, dissertation on the meaning of the Golden Order, do you want your research assistants to be Guinevere and Filinor? One's run off and one's asleep. I don't trust them.
That sounds like the people I worked with in real life at some point.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so serious question. Which Souls character would you hire as your research assistant? I think, personally, I'd go with Maria, because she does have research assistant experience.
That's true. I'd use Muriel, the turtle.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the only, like, spell merchant in Elden Ring that doesn't move or die. So he seems reliable.
Excellent. Now, Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
One last question.
Certainly, about this enemy. You know... Okay, I'm gonna drop a bombshell, right?
Okay.
You know how we brought up William Hope Hodgson?
Yes.
When we talked about Outlast?
Yeah.
He actually did write a book where there is a room that is an enemy. It's like a house that appears. It's like a predator in disguise as a house. So when it tries to lure you inside and then it disappears.
Late at night, I think of you. Your vision floods my mind.
So, Sophie, last question. If the location has no name, make a name at the end of the episode.
It had a name. It was Marika's bedchamber.
But you know that this is not an optional question. We say it's optional, but it's actually mandatory.
Certainly. Okay, the room is called Perfect Understanding of the Golden Order _final version _3.